is Jessica Crow. I am the founder of Apogee and the host of Change Leader Insights. And I'm so excited because today I have here with me, Jeff Skipper. Jeff is an international expert in accelerating change. He has worked with some heavy-hitting clients such as IBM, Goldman Sachs, Suncor, the Salvation Army. He's written a couple of books, Dancing with Disruption, which was published in 2003, and his latest book, High Impact Workshops for Leading Change. That's out now. He has a master's degree in organizational psychology, and he's a certified change management professional. He's got a lot going on, and I'm so glad that he is here with us today to share his wisdom, his insights. But first, Jeff, if you don't mind, just sharing with listeners and viewers a little bit more about who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Jessica, and great to be here with you as well. It's an interesting story of this guy who decides my career is going to be in sociology, and taking that first course in university and realizing I hate this stuff. So let's try psychology. And psychology was good, but I couldn't see myself having people lie on a couch by me and listen to all their issues. So ended up in a course on effectively business psychology, organizational psychology, and fell in love. So this was the right blend for me of what goes on in people's minds, why do they have challenges, and how does that combine with businesses that are trying to make a profit and drive revenue? How do we merge those two elements together? And that really got me started in a lot of my work. And I've just had some fantastic experiences through my career.
Yeah. And you've had a long career. I think you've been consulting for 25 years. And before that, I'm sure there was other experiences too, but you've had your own firm for quite some time now. Is that right?
Well, with IBM for 12 years and then out on my own in 2008. My website says 25 plus years. I'm over 30 years consulting now, but people start to wonder how old you are if I say that. So
no, that's fantastic. Well, when you and I spoke last, which was really a lot of fun. So I'm really excited about today's conversation. You had recently talked about, you've got a diverse background. You've worked with IBM, you've been consulting for over 30 years. And we were talking about selling and how lately you've been having conversations with clients about how to leverage sales and how it's related to change management. Can you tell listeners and viewers a little bit more about this kind of new arc in your career and conversations that you're having?
Yeah, if we rewound the clock 5 years back and said, Jeff, you're going to be teaching salespeople how to sell, I would have said, no, of course not. I won't be doing that. But the way this came about was I have a long-term client, where I started off helping them through a major technology change. And then we had created all this training as part of the change management work. Yeah. And I went to the sales enablement department and said, hey, this is all related to your sales technology. Someone needs to own this and deliver this once I'm gone.
Right.
And that started a relationship with them. And they said, could you help us out with the strategy for the business unit? Sure. Mm-hmm. And then would you mind talking to some of our reps around some of the things that you do? We think it's relevant. Okay, I'll look at that.
Yeah.
Hit me all of a sudden, that really when we deliver change leadership, we are helping, convincing people to shift a point of view, change their behaviors. Well, guess what we're doing in sales as well? We're influencing clients, customers to change their minds so that they'll buy your services, buy your product, appreciate it in a new way they hadn't before. The skills are 100% complementary. So they go hand in hand. And, you and I got onto this, and the shocker today is the fact that I'm now called on by organization, come in and teach our salespeople about how to sell. And it works.
Well, and I can see this working both ways too. And I love that you're having these conversations with sales organizations. And I think it's an important conversation for change leaders to understand too, if they don't have selling skills, that they should tune in and hear what you have to say too, because I think that might be something that's missing sometimes in the skill set of a change management practitioner, for example, where they've got the knowledge, the tools, and yet they still bump into challenges when they're coaching sponsors or trying to convince people why whatever the change may be is worth buying into. And they're missing those sales and negotiation in many ways skills. So it's a really important thing to think about when you're providing information to the sales force. What are some of the tips or advice you're giving to them that maybe could be applicable to people who are in change management roles as well?
Yeah, it's a great question because, to be honest, a lot of our approaches within change management are very positive focused, and that's good. So
Yeah,
we hear the benefits, the with them, why you should be
right.
moving in a certain direction. On the sales side, we talk more about disrupting the thinking of the buyer.
Oh,
So, they're in a normal state. And again, this is common language in change management. Person's going along, doing their job day to day. I know what to expect. I have my tasks. And in the sales language, you want to disrupt that thinking that the way you're doing things today is actually completely inadequate for what's coming. In
hmm,
fact, maybe it already came and you're actually behind the curve. So if I can create some dissatisfaction with the status quo, if I can get people to think that, shoot, I'm missing something and now there's a risk to my well-being, to my ability to stay in this position, I've now created the conditions whereby they're willing to accept a suggestion that if you
yeah.
buy this, if you start doing this instead, it will set you up for success going forward. So on the change side, we're often very positive. We don't really tap into that negative psychology, but it's fundamental to the sales side. And it doesn't mean that salespeople are going around trying to make people feel bad. That's not it. It's they point out realistic risks that their buyers are facing, and just pointing out, hey, if you don't do something about it, it could have some really negative consequences for you down the road. We have a solution to ensure that doesn't happen to you.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great insight. Why do you think that the change management side is less, we lean in less to the negative or the risk side when it comes to change, and we stay focused on the positive? Do you have any hypothesis around that?
Yeah, I think a lot of us are just really super positive individuals.
I can see that.
But another one, I was just talking to someone else, and she was sharing the fact, I really have my focus on positive psychology. And I pulled this off the shelf, which is
Learned optimism.
right, exactly. It's that we all subscribe to that. It's part of
Yeah.
the makeup we have as people who work within change, is that positive psychology is how it's a very powerful tool for helping people move. So if that's part of our foundational set of beliefs and models that we bring to the table, predisposes us to be on that positive side.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking, as you were saying that, I was thinking about like the scarf model, right? And that's how, you're moving away from threats towards reward. And so we're always thinking about how to do that. I like what you're saying though. Maybe this is something, and we could potentially explore this in the future, but just from a sales perspective and for a change management person, maybe there's an opportunity here for us, not necessarily to lean into the negative side, but how can we bridge that gap between what we're doing today and how can we create that pull in a way that the sales enablement team does with clients. I think that's an interesting conversation there. You also talk about, actually, you've got a lot of content, a lot of great content out there. And your latest book, High Impact Workshops for Leading Change, you provide people, not just change practitioners, anyone who is going to be leading a team, an organization through a major shift or transformation, actual practical exercises that you can do. So whether it's a sales team, right, or a change team, why did you create this book in particular?
Yeah, the reason why is I kept hearing fellow professionals like us say, hey, I'm working with an executive team or I've got a group and I want to create some kind of exercise that helps illustrate to them the challenges that sometimes come along with change,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. And we should be doing that. However, the answers were always the same. So there's some very common exercises that people use. So it's get into pairs, turn your backs to one another, and then change a couple things about yourself and then turn back, see if they can figure out what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And on and on. There are a few steps to that. And for myself, I've used those exercises several times. I say, I need something fresh and different. The audience has often experienced those exercises as
Right.
well. So they're looking for something new. I love being creative. I do a lot of facilitation and I commonly come up with something brand new when I'm going to a client and they
On the
want
spot.
people to
Yeah.
have a different experience. So what can we do with drawing things, with cubes that or dice that you roll on the table, with graphics, with worksheets, with canvases? And as I say that, some of your audience will be like, oh yeah, I've seen some of those things. Right. There's so many different things you can do. And I wanted to make them in many ways, not only experiential, but emotional, that you could actually get a sense of some of the emotions that people experience or are dealing with or struggling with as they're going through change. because that's what's sticky. If I can create an
Right.
experience where you get some of the emotions, people remember it and go, oh, so that's why some people resist. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to do something really unique and then put that into a book that it basically scripts the exercises so you can deliver them as written like a recipe.
Yeah. And the book is great. There's illustrations. You literally provide the materials you need down to the recap conversation that you should have, which is really helpful because finding new and innovative exercises like that is you can Google search and you'll get the same stuff. So I love that you've been able to package up 30 different activities that we can do. You mentioned the fact that many people have done these activities multiple times. As you said that earlier, I was thinking, I don't know if we do enough workshops or exercises to help people really understand the implications of a change. And, often there's a lot of telling, like, here's what's going to happen in the organization. Here's the strategy. Here are the data points. And then we sort of miss that opportunity, especially at the senior levels in the organization, to have those conversations. How do you, let's say you're a mid-level manager, how do you convince your team to have a conversation, a workshop like this? Like if you were to sell to a client, what are the benefits, or what are some of the sales language that you're using, kind of coming back to that idea of selling, because it's such an important activity. Any tips or recommendations there for someone who may not, feel like they have the whatever it is, they need a little help here to be able to see all the benefits of doing something like this?
It's a fair question. And we're always up against the issues of time and cost. So on every project as well, we don't have time for that. We're really moving. So it's funny you put it that way, because I always talk about risk then. So I'm all pushing the negatives there. Okay, we can move ahead. We can stick to your timeline. But reality is, if we don't pay attention to some of these factors, it puts risk on your returns you're expecting on this investment.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the technology changes and even restructuring, or we're going to apply a new process, there's a lot of money that goes into making that stuff happen. So you're going to get a return out of that. So my conversation often, listen, if we only get 75% of the people doing it sort of good when we flip the switch and say, okay, the change is in place, how does that impact the return? What is the risk? What could go wrong? Could we lose customers? Could we destroy loyalty, credibility? And we start stacking those things up. That was a total sales approach. You see the consequences of doing nothing. And hopefully you're now causing the individual to say, okay, yeah, all right, I don't want that to happen. I can envision that. What could we do about it? Well, let me tell you, there's a work we can run.
Well, let me pick from my list of 30 different activities.
Exactly.
Great. Oh, I love that. That's helpful. Thank you for sharing that, because I know there's listeners who are probably had that question of how do I do this if these things are so valuable? What do I, what conversation do I have? When you work with clients, so let's say you have the workshop, now they're bought in, they understand, that there's an important reason for the things that you're doing. Do you stick with a single methodology or framework, or how do you think about methodologies and frameworks? Because there's a lot of conversation in the change management world and beyond. I think there's a lot of confusion about change management, period. And I think part of it is because there are so many different frameworks and methodologies. And at the same time, there's this idea that there's no single, silver bullet. So what is your thought on how do you leverage models and frameworks? And what's your recommendation and advice to people who are trying to use one themselves or help the organization by leveraging one or more?
So I'll preface this by saying methodology is good. Structure is helpful, not only for us in terms of ensuring we get all the steps, but they're important for communicating to leaders that, hey, there's a process here and there's a process that works. But I want to share with you a story that illustrates some of the problems that happen. I was interviewing candidates to work on a very large multi-million-dollar transformation project. And they were going to come in and help the change team execute some of the process. But when I have people come to an interview, I say, bring some examples of your work. I'd like to see some of the things that you've done to ensure your clients end up happy and achieve the results that they are expecting. And what I typically get is I'll say, here's something I produced that's unique, a little bit creative. But I remember interviewing this one individual, and we got to that point. I said, I see you brought a binder of materials here. I'm kind of excited to see what's in there. What have you used to help your clients? And she pulled out 2 checklists that came from one of the major methodology people. I helped complete these. So no demonstration of creativity at all. But the bigger concern was I see people who are like that and they're caught in the box.
Right.
Methodology tells me what I must do, and I will execute those functions and check the list, and that will get us to the endpoint. But the reality is that's not a guarantee, and you can waste a lot of time and money doing it. So now on the other end of things, I go back to my IBM days. IBM is famous for having process. But what they said was, it's kind of like you got all of these steps you can do, but the first thing you do is scope out and determine which steps you need. You're going to decide a whole bunch potentially, depending on the size of your client, depending on the size of the scope, particular elements they want done. So it's very common that we take a long methodology and compress it down significantly. And the customer can see you're doing it and then realize, okay, you're just giving me what I need. But if I need a bit more, it's there for me. I can get it. So, there's been cases where, I have a client that says, we really don't need A, B, and C. And again, I may pose, okay, that creates some risks if we skip it, but I think we could get around it. Let's go for it and see how far we get.
Yeah.
So back to my first comment, methodology is structure, gives us a framework to follow that gives us positive results. But we can't be so stuck in it that we're not willing to flex and do different. As Agile has come in, it's helped with that. Say, hey, projects are being run differently. We need to flex with that, alter our methodologies to flow with how the project management wants to see this work. So methodology is good, but it can't be the be all and end all.
Yeah, no, that resonates. And I've loved working with project managers actually, where they've gone through, my training program, and they're like, well, when do I use these tools? When do I use this approach or process? I'm like, when it works, when it makes sense with you client, it's your toolkit, as you're sort of saying, like it's your toolkit, it's your checklist. You take what you need and you adapt it to the environment, the size of the project, the client, all of those things. So I love that is something that you're out there sharing and talking with your clients about. And it's something that I think we all need to hear and understand, is that methodology is good. Having that provides structure. And because of how organizations work, because of the way the world works, we have to be able to flex in the moment. And Agile does do that in many ways. But I think, and that's another methodology framework. Having several you can draw on is really valuable. There's so many out there that address behavior change, the brain science, emotions, process, strategy. So your toolkit could be quite large if you go out and pursue all the learnings. So what other advice would you give to people who are, at the forefront of a major change or transformation? In your experience, what are some of the biggest misses that you see with clients consistently? And then what do you see? Is there maybe one thing that if they do this thing, it works really well, and you've seen that happen? And maybe there's nothing on that side, right? Because clients are unique and they've got their own challenges and opportunities, but any perspective there on either side of those questions?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with the last one. So what's, that one tip that always works, that always provides a benefit? And that is going and building one-on-one relationships with influencers within an organization.
Love that.
So, and I won't lay claim to that. I had great mentors when I was getting started. And I remember one of them distinctly saying, your job is to go have coffee.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? So you got to get one-on-one with people and hopefully in a casual setting, get to know them as individuals. And then you can get into the business side of, hey, we're trying to get something done here. What's your role? How do you play into that? Because they're allies. When you run into difficult situations, you need folks you can go to and say, hey, I'm stuck here. I need another point of view, or I need a push. Can you use your influence to help me where I'm running into a barrier here? So those one-on-ones are really important. I remember being flabbergasted at something one of my peers did once. So I grew up in a very... I was taught respect for a very deep level, which meant I never violated the hierarchy. I would never do an end run around someone. And I had another individual, he was building all these relationships, and he came back and said one day, yeah, I went to the senior vice president of this business unit, And I asked them if they would try out using the software that's being rolled out, and then took pictures of them so we put in the newsletter. And you did what? Did you get permission? No, I didn't ask anybody. Okay. But having those relationships enabled him to go do that. That's something I've replicated along the way.
Right.
Now, you asked about things that I think really detract.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of projects now, and the majority of them at the beginning involved very large spreadsheets. We documented every detail around changes that were happening and exactly what it would mean for individuals. I don't do those anymore. I've discarded the big spreadsheets. So again, with conversations, I can figure out impacts for large groups fairly quickly and then just list those out. So I try not to do multi-hundreds of lines in a spreadsheet around all the impacts that are happening. Instead, I'll just say, hey, we got a major change. This process is going to be vastly different. We've got an as is and a to be diagram. And then I go to the training person. You need to map this and develop the training material to handle it.
Right.
Asian person. These are the key messages that are going to be related to it. But I'm not going to go line by line identifying this field became that field. It often becomes vaporware, if you've heard that. It sits on the shelf, goes nowhere, is discarded at the end of the project, and yet we could spend days and weeks putting that stuff together.
Yeah, it's thinking about like, what information are you trying to convey to which individuals in the organization, and what you're describing is something that is better served if you're going to be getting to a technical level of detail, then save that for the training if that's what's required.
Exactly.
But well, I agree with you though. I agree, but I think there's value in really understanding the current state as well. And I think that sometimes that gets brushed under the rug a little bit because there's a lot of excitement around the future state. And there's a lack of acknowledgement of that sense of loss, for one, of the status quo, but also that, there's very real, of course, there's very real changes that are happening. But I think being able to convey the current state and the impact at some level is important. And you're saying that is important too. But
it is. Let's dig into that, Jessica, because what you said is so extremely important. And you said it because of the level of experience you have. I key in on that because it's the same for me. So I'm going to give you an example. You get this right away.
Yeah.
I was talking to a group of executives around changes, and I know I had a couple in the odds going, this doesn't really apply to me. I don't have much going on. So I focused on one and said, tell me about something that is happening in your organization. What's on your mind? He said, well, we are going to be retiring one of our brands. So I said, do you think any of your employees have a concern about that? I said, yeah, some will be feeling that. I said, do you think they might feel a sense of loss? And this is what you were getting at. And he hadn't even considered it. It's just, we're just going to eliminate this brand over here and everything now falls under this brand. Easy. Some people use the phrase lift and shift. And I hate that because lift and shift makes it sound it's so easy, and it's not. People experience a sense of loss. So on paper, that might be one line, a simple thing. We move these things over here. But you pick up on there's an emotional aspect that's critical. And until you deal with that, some people might feel really resentful about that.
Yeah.
So in 5 minutes, we figured out, hey, you got a major impact for people. And I told them, I want you to consider in sports, when a really famous player retires, what do they do with their jersey or their number? They retire. Might be a whole ceremony. Okay, what can you borrow from the ceremony so you feel like the loss has been acknowledged?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, so that's all we need to do. I don't need to do a big spreadsheet or dig into a whole bunch of stuff, but the experience that you and I have tells us emotional impact, and here's some things you can do about it that honors the past and the
I actually like that jersey analogy. I think that'd be a lot of fun for organizations too, to be able to have something like that, because it's so easy and it quickly addresses the sense of loss. It acknowledges what people are feeling and it honors and celebrates so people can move forward. I love that, actually. That maybe that's your next book, is ways to honor the change, the loss of change, or loss due to change. At any rate, well, so you provided a lot of great information and insights, and you've got books out there that people can read. Where do they find your books if they want to buy your books? Where do they get in touch with you if they'd like to work with you? You do consulting and facilitation and all sorts of stuff. What's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, certainly my website, jeffskipperconsulting.com, and that'll get you to the books and all the services that I offer. I've started branching into some new areas, so I now work directly with other consultants who are looking to raise their game, really improve what they offer to their clients, how they go marketing their services. Because I recognize when I started with IBM, I had this incredible opportunity to be taught how to consult. They ran their own consulting school. But many don't have that opportunity. So why not leverage that from someone who's been around a while? But the books that are there, I have a ton of downloads that are there for free. People want to make use of those. So templates and guides and checklists to help people get through some of the tasks that they encounter when they're doing change work.
Wonderful. Do you have a newsletter too? I'm trying to remember if you have a newsletter that you could subscribe to get information directly in their inbox.
Two of them. So I love writing. So my main newsletter is called Impacted, and it focuses on leading change and also strategy for organizations. And then I started a new one last year called Consulting Vitamins that just gives out tips and tricks for consultants and the way that they work with their clients.
That is very generous that you're sharing and giving back in this way. So thank you for doing that for the community that's listening, for consultants and change professionals out there. I love that is your, the way that you're giving back. So thank you for doing that for everyone. This has been a great conversation. I'm so glad that we had a chance to connect and I got to learn from you today. And your energy and your vibe is just so positive. So I'm wishing you so much success in 2025 and beyond, and another 30 plus years of great work. Thank you again for your time, and have a great year.
Thank you. You too, Jessica. It's been my pleasure talking with you. Great conversation.